So think about all the stuff we do online every day. Sharing things, messages, banking.
Your whole digital life, basically.
Exactly. And it feels like, I don't know, like having this really precious jewel, but it's kind of locked in a glass box. You can see it, use it, but...
But there's always that little nagging feeling, isn't there? Is it really safe? Is someone else looking?
Yeah. And that feeling, well, that really gets to the heart of a huge challenge in telecommunications, right?
Absolutely. For the longest time, it's been this constant balancing act. We want faster speeds, faster data.
Always faster.
But we're also, trying desperately to keep it all secure. It's this fundamental tension.
And the stakes, I mean, they're just massive. Look at the numbers. Cybercrime costs globally projected to hit $10.5 trillion in 2024.
Trillion. It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
And what about the average cost for just one data breach? Nearly $4.88 million.
Wow. And that's not just, numbers on a spreadsheet. That hits real people.
Totally. It means identity theft, fraud. Real headaches for individuals like you listening. It's this feeling that your private info just isn't that private anymore.
Exactly. These aren't just abstract threats. They represent a real erosion of trust in the digital systems we rely on every single day. And the attacks just keep getting more sophisticated.
Right, pushing the limits of our current security, especially as we demand more speed. But what if that whole equation could change? Imagine, sending huge amounts of data really far, super fast, but making it virtually impenetrable at the same time.
That's sort of the holy grail, isn't it?
Well, China's just announced something exactly like that. They've managed to send data at 1 terabit per second.
1 terabit?
Yeah, over 1,200 kilometers. And with what they're calling unprecedented security, using this new system they developed, IEAC.
Integrated Encryption and Communication. Yes. Look, this could be a real game changer.
How so? What's the big deal compared to what we do now?
Well, the traditional problem, like we said, is that trade-off. You push for higher speeds.
And the standard ways we encrypt data can actually slow things down. They become bottlenecks. Sometimes they even create new weaknesses.
Right. Or if you want really, really strong security, you often have to accept slower speeds.
Exactly. It's been an either situation for a long time.
I like the analogy you used before we started recording, like trying to carry a pizza and a soda on a unicycle.
Huh. Yeah, it feels a bit like that. You can do it, maybe, but one wobble.
And disaster. Okay, so to really get how big this 1 terabit per second is, let's put it in context. What are typical speeds now?
Good idea. So Ookla data shows the global median mobile download speed, end of last year, November 2024, was around, 61.5 megabits per second?
61.5 megabits per second.
61.5 megabits.
Okay.
And somewhere like India, big digital economy.
Right. At the start of 2024, their median mobile speed was a bit higher, around 94.6 megabits, still in the megabits range.
Okay, 60, 90 megabits.
Yeah.
And China's test hit 1 terabit per second.
That's 1 million megabits per second.
Whoa. Okay, that's a staggering difference.
It really puts it into perspective. And think about where we came from. The early internet. We measured speeds in kilobits per second.
Right. Dial-up modems making all those noises.
Exactly. So this exponential growth in speed is really what's fueled, everything digital.
Okay, so let's get into the how. This IEAC system, Professor Lilin Yi and the team at Shanghai Jiao Tong University. How did they pull this off? It sounds a bit like pulling a rabbit out of a fiber optic cable.
That's a fun way to put it. It's not quite magic, but it is a very clever approach. The core idea, the real innovation, is how they handle encryption.
Okay.
Instead of it being like a separate layer or process you add onto the data, they've basically transformed the light signal itself into the unbreakable code. The encryption is integrated right into the physical transmission.
Hold on. So it's not just faster encryption software running on top. They've made the actual light carrying the data inherently secure.
That's the essence of it. Yes. Think about it. Traditional encryption uses algorithms, math problems, run on hardware or software after the data is generated but before it's sent, or layered on top.
Right. And those layers can be points of weakness, especially at super high speeds.
Precisely. Those layers can be attacked or they struggle to keep up. The IEAC system tries to bypass that whole problem by building security into the physics of the signal from the get-go.
Wow. Okay. And they actually tested this in a lab. What did that look like?
They did. It was a pretty complex setup. They used 26 different wavelengths of light simultaneously. Think of them as 26 separate data lanes on a highway.
Okay.
All running within the standard C-band frequency range, about 3.9 terahertz wide. And each lane carried a signal packed with data, a dual polarization signal at 32 gigabaud.
Sounds dense. Lots of data packed in.
Very dense. And then they sent all this through a loop of optical fiber built to simulate a real-world distance of 1,200 kilometers.
Okay, so they mimicked the long-distance transmission. And the results, did it work? Speed, security.
The results were pretty remarkable. First, the error rate was very low, less than 2 times 10 to the minus 2. That means the data got through cleanly.
Good.
Second, the net speed achieved was indeed that 1 terabit per second figure.
Headline number.
Okay.
But third, and this is crucial for the security claim, the information leakage was near zero. Less than 0.2 bits per symbol.
Near zero leakage. What does that actually mean in practical terms?
It means that even if an eavesdropper somehow managed to tap into the fiber and capture the light signal, they wouldn't be able to extract any meaningful information from it. The way the signal is structured makes it inherently resistant to interpretation without the proper key, which is also integrated in a novel way. That near-zero leakage is the real indicator of the security breakthrough.
So it's not just scrambled, it's fundamentally unreadable if intercepted.
That's the goal, yes. A huge step beyond just trying to scramble things faster.
This feels incredibly futuristic, but it's interesting to think about the history here. Let's take a quick detour. Remember Samuel Morse? 1844. What hath God wrought?
Exactly. That first public telegraph message. Just the idea of sending information instantly over miles. It must have felt like pure magic then.
Absolutely. A total paradigm shift. Connecting people like never before, even if the speed was, incredibly slow by today's standards.
And then, jump forward a bit, 1858, the first transatlantic cable.
A monumental engineering feat, even though it only worked for a few weeks initially.
Right, but the drive there was about making the connection, shrinking the world, sending messages across the ocean at all. Speed or just connectivity was the primary goal.
Security was secondary, really. It relied on the physical security of the cable itself, maybe some simple codes, but it wasn't the integrated concern it is today.
And that's the big contrast, isn't it? Back then, it was all about achieving speed or connection. Now, with this IEAC system, China seems to be achieving incredible speed and security together, built in from the start.
That's the potential significance. It directly tackles our modern dilemma. We need ever-increasing bandwidth for streaming, AI, cloud computing, everything. But we absolutely cannot afford to keep sacrificing security to get it. This technology suggests maybe we can have both, have our cake and eat it too, telecom style.
And does this tie into that idea of digital sovereignty? Nations wanting control over their own data networks?
It certainly could play a role. If a system like IEAC can make data interception at the physical fiber level extremely difficult or near impossible, that inherently strengthens a nation's control over the data flowing within its own borders. It hardens the infrastructure against certain types of espionage or interference.
So it becomes a tool for national digital security as well.
Potentially, yes. It aligns with that growing global focus on who controls data and the infrastructure it runs on.
It reminds me of that Peter Drucker quote, "The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said."
Interesting connection. How so?
Well, in our digital communications, the unsaid thing, the vulnerability that's always lurking beneath the surface, is the risk of interception, the lack of guaranteed privacy.
I see. Yeah, the unspoken assumptions and risks.
And this breakthrough seems aimed squarely at addressing that unspoken vulnerability, trying to make the secure channel the default, not an add-on.
That's a great way to frame it. Tackling the hidden risks, the things we often don't explicitly talk about when we just click send.
Now, important point. This Chinese achievement, while impressive, isn't happening in a vacuum, is it? There's a wider race going on.
Oh, absolutely. This is one very significant result, but researchers globally are pushing boundaries. You've got teams at Aston University in the UK, for instance. They've shown much higher speeds, over 400 terabits per second.
Wow.
But critically, over much shorter distances. Different applications, different trade-offs.
And there's work on wireless too, right? UCL?
Yes. University College London has also hit record speeds for wireless data transmission. So innovation is happening across different mediums, fiber, wireless.
And then there's the whole quantum realm. Quantum cryptography.
Yeah.
That always sounds like the ultimate solution.
It does, doesn't it? The promise of quantum cryptography, things like quantum key distribution, or QKD, is security based on the laws of physics itself.
Meaning, theoretically unbreakable.
Theoretically, yes. because trying to eavesdrop on a quantum key exchange inevitably disturbs it, leaving a detectable trace. It's a fascinating field.
But it's not quite ready for prime time for this kind of long-distance, high-speed network, is it?
Not yet. There are still big challenges with scalability, cost, distance limitations, and integrating it seamlessly with current high-speed networks. There's a ton of research going on, including in the UK, trying to build practical quantum networks.
Right.
But for now, technologies like IEAC operating within classical physics but using novel techniques are perhaps more immediately applicable for upgrading existing infrastructure.
So lots of different horses in this race, aiming for faster, safer data.
Exactly. It's a dynamic field. But even with all this research, the current threat landscape is, well, it's pretty grim for telecoms.
Yeah, you mentioned a statistic earlier. Telecom was the #1 target in 2023.
That's right. According to one report, the telecom industry accounted for 38%, more than a third of all tracked cyber attacks last year. They are constantly under siege.
And it takes ages to even detect a breach sometimes, doesn't it?
Frighteningly long. For financial organizations in 2024, and they spend a lot on security, the average time to detect and contain a breach was still around 168 days.
168 days, that's almost 6 months. Half a year where attackers could be inside a network.
Exactly. That long dwell time allows for incredible amounts of damage, data theft, reconnaissance. It highlights why proactive, built-in security is so critical. You can't just rely on detecting attacks after they happen.
And this issue of connectivity versus security plays out in complex ways globally, too. We see things like internet shutdowns in places like Jammu and Kashmir, citing security concerns, which then impacts basic connectivity for people. It's a really tangled issue.
It is. Access to information and communication is vital, but governments also face genuine security challenges. Balancing those is incredibly difficult and often controversial.
So back to this IEAC system and the idea of potentially unbreakable encryption built into the network. It sounds amazing for privacy and security, but does it raise any red flags, any downsides?
Now we get to the really tricky ethical dimension. It's the classic double-edged sword, isn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, on the one hand, truly unbreakable, universally deployed encryption could be like a superhero cape for privacy, protecting ordinary citizens, journalists, activists, businesses from unwarranted surveillance and data theft.
Okay, that sounds good.
But on the other hand, it could also be an invisibility cloak for criminals and terrorists. If encryption is so strong that nobody, not even law enforcement with a legitimate warrant, can access communications.
How do you investigate serious crimes, child exploitation, terrorism plots, organized crime?
Exactly. It creates a huge challenge for public safety and national security. Where do you draw the line? How do you balance the fundamental right to privacy against the need to prevent harm?
It's a massive puzzle. There's that whole debate, like the San Bernardino iPhone case a few years back, right? Law enforcement needing access versus the tech company's stance on user privacy and encryption integrity.
Precisely. And systems offering potentially perfect, unbreakable encryption embedded in the network fabric would just intensify that debate massively. There's a lot of ethical discussion around this, looking at it through different philosophical lenses, like a Rawlsian principles of justice and privacy. It's deeply complex.
No easy answers there.
Definitely not.
Okay, so wrapping this up, China's achievement with the IEAC system, sending 1 terabit per second securely over 1,200 kilometers.
Yeah.
It really does feel like a potential game changer.
It absolutely does, because it directly confronts that long-standing, frustrating trade-off between speed and security that has defined so much of network development.
And the hope, I guess, is that this kind of breakthrough, whether it's this specific system or others inspired by it, could pave the way for a future internet that is both incredibly fast and fundamentally more secure.
That's the optimistic vision, yes. A global network infrastructure where robust security isn't an expensive add-on, but an inherent property.
So a final thought then, maybe for you listening to mull over, building on that ethical point we just touched on, is truly unbreakable encryption, if it becomes widely possible and deployed, ultimately a net positive or a net negative for society?
Yeah, how do we, as societies, navigate that incredibly complex balance between individual privacy and collective security when the technology itself becomes this powerful?
Something to think about. It's definitely a space we'll be watching closely.